So I created a new playlist. Hi, my name's Kevin. This is the typical cripple, and I wanted to talk about. Let's get my about how good we have it in our current American culture, such as it is, and I want to point something out. So I've been reading this book. I listened to a podcast on Cleared Hot with Andy Stump, and I thought it was really unusual for him to have a female guest. Although it was interesting, he did have Jessica Lynch, and as a matter of fact, I think he was on the rescue party for Ms. Lynch. And anyway, he set the story straight on that one, I'll tell you. But anyway, here's a book, Only Cry for the Living by Holly McKay. And by the way, the podcast is in the How the World Is playlist I provided for you on my channel, which I thought was really interesting because she focused on the human suffering that happens in the war around the capture of Mosul, and how ISIS ended up dealing with the civilian issue and how they ruled their area. And I want to make a point that same thing can happen here in the United States. I think we see what happens at Chaz, which is not very far from me, and thank God that project collapsed. But there are other areas in the United States that pop up and then go away. And what I want to consider here is that look at what happens in those areas. I mean, once police leave, is everyone just so happy and so free and so peaceful that everything goes away, all the problems go away, or does that become a focus for more problems, more chaos, more evil? And I don't want to live there. I do not want to live in the environment that Ms. McKay is talking about. We're flirting on that. Flirting with it. And I just want to see this. I think our immigration problem could be solved by the enforcement of immigration laws, that there are many dangers outside the Western world. There are many problems that we don't want amongst us. And I, for one, am someone that can't really defend himself. I'll give it a try. But I don't think I'm very good at it. So, but but on the other hand, we'll give it a try. And what I'm trying to say is, that blustering, that posturing has certainly well in the past, because people that look for people to prey upon, they're looking for something quick, something opportunistic. And I think it's come to a time where it's not good enough just to say, phew, it wasn't me, thank you, Lord. Because it's going to be somebody else. And it's going to be somebody else. And it's going to be somebody that may not have considered how bad things can go. Dan Carlin wrote a book about how the end is always near. And yeah, okay. The whole world hasn't collapsed in upon itself, but he does point out in Asian Supernova that for the Japanese people, their world did collapse. They had huge firestorms. They had huge amounts of suffering, death, destruction, because of the way they did things. At the time, in the 1940s, Japanese war, the Japanese war machine was in many ways as vast or as effective as the Americans or the Germans or many other powers. And we have to consider something that the Japanese were wanting to become a power in their own right at the time. How to, the way global power was expressed was through colonialism and direct conquest over people that were conquered by other people. And we can go all the way down to Sargon the Great, even further than that, where people want to take over another area, another land. We have it all over the U.S. In the pre-Columbian exchange. These cultures or primitive cultures are not just wonderful places until the white people showed up. I can tell you myself that being of Northern European stock, as much as 99%, I mean, my ancestors went out and kicked other ancestors all over the map. But that was then. And now we do things differently. Maybe we send, aircraft, and yes, things are very disproportionate. If you got a bow and arrow and you're shooting up at a helicopter or an aircraft of some sort, yeah, you're at a distinct disadvantage. But here's the thing. In order to field an aircraft, one must have an entire assembly line and product development industry that goes way back than that. It goes so far back. And it starts with New England using water to make textiles, and children having their hands all gnarled up because, the only, there was a story when I was a kid that there were, the reason why they used child labor in many of these areas is because their little hands could fit into those areas. They were the only ones, yes. They were crippled for life. And yes, they were, they had horrible lives after that. But now we're at a point where me, non-productive me, lives a good life, is taken care of in a way outside the family system. It's not to say the family system isn't the ideal. It's that my family was in no way set up for raising me, if you will. And because of that, I benefited from government spending, from government largesse. In many ways, I'm thankful for that. But in many ways, what are the costs of that caring for people that wouldn't otherwise make it in a Darwinian struggle for survival? And I think we need to consider that when you consider tearing down the system. Tearing down the system, you're tearing down that which supports me, and that which supports you as well. And I want to point something out, that human brutality only has the bounds should people say, no, I'm not going to distrust my neighbor. No, I'm gonna reach out and talk to people. In a way, it comes down to confrontation. Are we able to confront one another before it comes to a point where, is in this book, she talks about neighbors who had lived together for 25 years. Turn on one another. That's horrible. That really scares me. So I want to point out this book, Only Try for the Living. I want to point out another book, Empire of the Sun and Moon. When I was a kid, I knew not all native cultures were violent, but the successful ones were. Here's a successful culture. Comanches, and they had many enemies, but they were, it's part of our history, guys. And Dancing with Monsters, or Dancing in the Glory of Monsters. That is recent. If you had to put a timeline on it, I would say Empire of the Sun and Moon. That was some horrible stuff in the West. Dancing in the Glory of Monsters. That was pretty big suffering most recently. But even in the last decade, this book right here talks about how bad suffering is. And to think it can't happen here, you just wait and see. You just wait and see. As for me, I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be a part of of that kind of suffering. And but on the other hand, I'm just giving it a stab myself. One disabled guy saying, I see it coming. And I think you need to be shocked and amazed at how bad it can be. So at best, listen to the podcast, read the books. And at the very least, just listen to the podcast. And consider, why did America find it necessary to utilize a weapon of pure horror? But yet, on the other hand, the alternative was even worse. And then I want you to consider listening to the Andy Stumpf Cleared Hot podcast, so that you can consider these things and really can figure it out. Do I really want this? Do I think that my tearing down of the system is leading up to this? I think it is. That's my opinion. And if you want to contact me and talk about it and say otherwise, sure, why not? I'll take that debate. But other than that, my name's Kevin. This is the Atypical Cripple. I'll see you on the next bounce.